Jack Wilson stood at the bedroom doorway, watching his wife, Megan Packer, pack her suitcase with meticulous care. At 35, the high school physics teacher still found himself marveling at Megan's beauty, her auburn hair glowing in the morning light, her green eyes sparkling with excitement. Even after 10 years of marriage, she could still make his heart skip a beat. "Are you sure you have everything you need for the conference?" Jack asked, leaning against the doorframe. Megan looked up from her packing, a soft smile playing on her lips. "I think so. 5 days in Chicago. I want to be prepared for anything." Jack nodded, his eyes drawn to the lingerie Megan carefully folded and tucked into her suitcase. He recognized the delicate lace as part of the set he'd given her for their anniversary last month. A warmth spread through his chest at the thought that she wanted to wear it, even on a business trip. "Taking the special occasion stuff, I see," he commented with a grin. Megan's cheeks flushed slightly. "Well, you never know. Might have a fancy dinner or something." As she continued packing, Jack couldn't help but notice the effort Megan put into her appearance. She'd spent an extra 20 minutes on her makeup that morning, carefully applying eyeshadow and mascara she usually saved for date nights. Her hair was styled in loose waves, far from her usual messy bun for work. "You're going all out for this conference," Jack observed. "Must be some important people there." Megan shrugged, not meeting his eyes. "Just want to make a good impression, that's all." Jack watched as she spritzed herself with the expensive perfume he'd given her with the anniversary lingerie. The familiar scent of jasmine and vanilla filled the air, stirring memories of their intimate moments. As Megan zipped up her suitcase, Jack felt a twinge of something he couldn't quite name. Unease, suspicion? He quickly pushed the feeling aside. This was Megan, his wife, his best friend, the woman he trusted above all others. "All set?" he asked, forcing a smile. Megan nodded, wheeling her suitcase to the door. "I think so. I'll call you every night, I promise." She leaned in, pressing her lips to his in a lingering kiss that left Jack slightly breathless. Her fingers trailed along his jaw as she pulled away. "I'll miss you," she murmured. "I'll miss you, too," Jack replied. "Have a great time. Don't forget to bring me back a souvenir." Megan laughed, the sound light and musical. "Of course. Love you. Love you, too," Jack called as she headed down the stairs. He watched from the window as Megan loaded her suitcase into her car and drove away, waving as she turned the corner out of sight. The house felt strangely empty without her presence. Shaking off the melancholy, Jack headed to the kitchen to make coffee before grading papers. Sarah replied warmly, "I'm sure we will." As they made their way to the elevator, Jack's heart began to race. They were so close now. Just a few more minutes, and he would be face to face with Megan and her lover. He took a deep breath, trying to center himself. Sarah squeezed his hand gently. "You got this, Jack. I'm right here with you." The elevator dinged, and they stepped out onto the 7th floor. The plush carpet muffled their footsteps as they made their way down the hallway. Jack's eyes darted from door to door, searching for room 714, where he knew Megan and Adam were staying. As they approached the room, Jack froze. Voices drifted from the next room over, voices he recognized all too well. "Oh, Adam." Megan's breathy laugh sent daggers through Jack's heart. "Tonight is going to be our most passionate yet. I can't wait to show you what I brought." "I bet it's that little red number," Adam's deep voice replied, full of smug confidence. "The one that drives me wild." "God, Megan, you're insatiable." "Only for you, baby," Megan purred. Poor Jack has no idea what he's missing out on. Sometimes I can't believe how oblivious he is. White-hot rage flooded through Jack at those words. How dare they mock him like this? His hands clenched into fists at his sides as he fought the urge to burst into their room right then and there. Sarah placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Stick to the plan," she whispered. "We've got them dead to rights now." Jack nodded jerkily, allowing Sarah to guide him into their room. He paced back and forth as Sarah quickly set up her recording equipment, positioning a small camera to capture the hallway and the door to Megan and Adam's room. "Okay," Sarah said, double-checking the angle. "We're all set. How do you want to play this?" Jack took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "I want to knock on their door. When Megan answers, I want you to start recording. Can you do it on your phone so it's not obvious?" Sarah nodded, pulling out her smartphone. "Consider it done. Are you ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Jack replied grimly. They stepped out into the hallway, Sarah positioning herself slightly behind Jack with her phone held casually at her side. Jack raised his hand and knocked firmly on the door to room 714. There was a moment of muffled confusion from inside, then footsteps approaching. Jack steeled himself as the door swung open. Megan stood there in a silky robe, her hair tousled and cheeks flushed. Her eyes widened in shock as she registered Jack's presence. "Jack," she stammered, "what are you doing here?" "Surprise, darling," Jack said, his voice preternaturally calm. "I thought I'd join you at this teacher conference." Megan's face drained of color. Behind her, Adam appeared in the doorway, equally stunned. "Jack, I can explain," Megan began, but Jack cut her off with a raised hand. "Oh, I'm sure you can," he said coolly. "I'm very interested to hear how you explain being here with Adam when you're supposed to be at a conference in Chicago." Megan and Adam exchanged panicked glances, clearly trying to get their story straight. Jack almost laughed at how quickly their lies fell apart. "It's not what it looks like." Adam tried, but his voice lacked conviction. "Really?" Jack arched an eyebrow. "Because it looks like my wife is having an affair with a co-worker. Please, enlighten me as to what's really going on here." Megan's eyes filled with tears. "Jack, please, can we talk about this privately?" "Why?" Jack asked, his tone deceptively mild. "You didn't seem too concerned about privacy when you were mocking me a few minutes ago. What was it you said?" "That I'm oblivious to what I'm missing out on." Megan blanched, realizing they'd been overheard. Adam stepped forward, attempting to look authoritative despite being clad only in boxer shorts. "Look, Jack, this is a private matter between—" "A private matter?" Jack interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "I think you lost the right to privacy when you decided to sleep with my wife." People were starting to peer out of their rooms, drawn by the commotion. Sarah stepped forward, placing a calming hand on Jack's arm. "Maybe we should take this inside," she suggested quietly. Jack nodded, pushing past Megan and Adam into their room. Sarah followed, closing the door behind them. "Who's she?" Megan demanded, her shock giving way to indignation. "This is Sarah," Jack replied calmly. "My friend and witness to your infidelity." "Witness?" Adam sputtered. "What the hell are you playing at, Wilson?" Jack ignored him, turning to his suitcase. He unzipped it calmly and began removing clothes, laying them neatly on the bed. "What are you doing?" Megan asked, her voice trembling. "Unpacking," Jack replied matter-of-factly. "I've booked the adjoining room for the week. I hope you don't mind if I join your little getaway." "You can't do that," Adam protested. "This is our room." Jack fixed him with a steely gaze. "Actually, I can. This room is registered under my name and paid for with my credit card. You're welcome to leave if you're uncomfortable." Megan and Adam exchanged helpless glances, their romantic retreat crumbling around them. "When you decided to betray our marriage," Jack said, his voice sharp, Megan's face contorted with a mix of anger and desperation. "You don't understand. I was unhappy. Adam made me feel alive again. You were always so focused on your work, your students." "Don't you dare try to blame this on me," Jack interrupted, his calm demeanor cracking slightly. "If you were unhappy, you should have talked to me. We could have worked on our marriage. Instead, you chose to lie, to cheat, to make a fool of me." Sarah stood up, placing a gentle hand on Jack's shoulder. "I think I'll give you two some privacy," she said softly, retreating into the next room. Megan's eyes followed Sarah, a spark of jealousy igniting. Is that why you're doing this? You're sleeping with her, aren't you? This is all just revenge. Jack laughed, though there was no humor in it. You really don't get it, do you? Sarah is my friend. She's been here to support me through the nightmare you created. Unlike you, some people actually understand the concept of loyalty. Megan's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her. What happens now, Jack? What are we going to do? Jack raised an eyebrow. We, he repeated. There is no we anymore, Megan. You made your choice. Now you get to live with it. As if on cue, Adam appeared behind Megan, his face haggard. We need to talk, he said urgently. The school board is calling an emergency meeting next week. They want us all there to explain what happened. Megan turned to Jack, her eyes pleading. Jack, please. You have to help us. If we lose our jobs. I don't have to do anything, Jack cut in, standing up, his expression hard. You both made your beds. Now you can lie in them. Although, he added with a hint of sarcasm, I suppose you've already been doing plenty of that. Adam's face flushed with anger. He stepped toward Jack, fists clenched. You smug bastard. You think you're so much better than us. Jack didn't flinch. I didn't cheat on my spouse. I didn't lie to everyone I know. So yes, Adam, I do think I'm better than you. And if you're smart, you'll back off right now. Something in Jack's tone made Adam hesitate. The physical intimidation that might have worked before seemed to bounce off Jack's newfound confidence. This isn't over, Adam growled, turning to leave. Oh, I think it is, Jack called after him. By the way, I've already spoken to my lawyer. He'll be contacting both of you about the divorce proceedings. Megan gasped. Divorce? Jack, no. We can work this out. Please, just give me another chance. Jack shook his head. There are no more chances, Megan. You threw away 10 years of marriage for a fling. I deserve better than that. I deserve someone I can trust. Tears streamed down Megan's face as she made one last attempt. What about all our friends? Our colleagues? They'll take sides. It'll be so messy. I'm not worried, Jack replied calmly. I've been nothing but honest and transparent throughout this whole ordeal. I think you'll find that honesty goes a long way. As if to prove his point, Jack's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He glanced at it, a small smile tugging at his lips. That was Karen from the PTA, he said. She's organizing a support rally for me. Apparently, quite a few parents appreciate how I've handled the situation. They're calling me a role model for integrity. Megan's face crumpled. This was all going so wrong. She had never imagined her affair would blow up like this. In her mind, she would have eventually ended things with Adam, and Jack would have been none the wiser. Now, her entire life was falling apart. I think you should go, Jack said quietly. Sarah and I have plans for the day, and I'm sure you and Adam have a lot to discuss. Defeated, Megan turned to leave. At the door, she paused, looking back at Jack with tear-filled eyes. I do love you, you know. I never meant to hurt you like this. Jack met her gaze, his expression a mixture of pain and resolve. If you loved me, Megan, you wouldn't have done this. Love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice. It's choosing your partner every day, through good times and bad. You chose Adam. Now you get to live with that choice. Since Jack's arrival, the PE program had never been stronger. But as Adam continued to downplay his involvement, Jack couldn't ignore the growing tension in the room. Megan's face darkened, her discomfort becoming palpable. Adam's attempt to distance himself from the situation was only making things worse. After their brief discussion, Eleanor Simmons called for a recess to give the board a chance to deliberate. The silence in the room was suffocating. When the board members returned, their faces were somber. Eleanor stood, her voice steady but stern. After careful consideration, she began, The board has reached a decision. Mr. Wilson, your record and professionalism throughout this ordeal have been exemplary. We have decided that you will retain your position at Millbrook High. A faint murmur of approval passed through the room, but it was quickly stifled by the gravity of her next words. As for Mrs. Wilson and Mr. Reeves, she continued, her eyes never leaving them, your actions have deeply impacted this community. You will both be placed on administrative leave. Pending further investigation, the room erupted into an uncomfortable silence. Megan's tears were the first to fall, and Adam slammed his hand down on the table in frustration. Jack remained still, feeling both relief and sadness at the unfolding events. As the meeting adjourned, Jack found himself surrounded by a sea of support. Parents, students, and colleagues offered kind words, congratulating him for handling the situation with dignity. One student, Emily, approached Jack, her eyes bright with admiration. "Mr. Wilson," she whispered, "you've made me believe in myself. You're the reason I want to be a scientist someday." Jack's throat tightened, and for a moment he couldn't speak. This was a real reason he taught. Not for recognition, but for moments like these. As he left the meeting, the warmth of the support felt almost unreal. But in the distance, he saw Megan sitting alone in her car. Their eyes met briefly, and Jack saw the deep sadness there, a sadness he had felt only months ago. The fallout for Megan and Adam was swift and harsh. The community began to avoid them, whispering behind their backs, making their presence felt wherever they went. Megan tried to redeem herself by volunteering, but her efforts were met with polite indifference. Adam's temper flared, and rumors of his outburst spread like wildfire. Jack, on the other hand, threw himself into his work. He accepted the role of coaching the science team, and in doing so, found purpose and fulfillment. His students excelled, and when they qualified for the national championship, Jack's pride in them was immeasurable. Yet, as Jack watched them celebrate, a sense of bittersweetness filled him. He had received an offer to teach at a prestigious science school in another state. At first, he rejected it. Millbrook was his home. But as time went on, the weight of recent events settled on him, and he realized it was time for a change. The decision was made. Jack was leaving Millbrook. But before he could leave, the community gave him a farewell he never expected. Students, parents, colleagues, people he had touched in ways he hadn't even realized, stood in front of his house with signs of support, presenting him with a scrapbook filled with heartfelt messages. "We wanted you to know how much you mean to us," Karen Thompson, the PTA president, said, tears in her eyes. "You've taught our children more than just science. You've taught them the value of kindness, honesty, and integrity." Jack was overwhelmed. It was a goodbye filled with love, gratitude, and emotion. As he looked out at the crowd, he noticed Megan in the distance. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, filled with so much unspoken pain, regret, and lost opportunities. Then she turned and walked away. Jack's heart ached, but he knew his path was clear. The life they once shared was over, but his future was bright, filled with the chance to make a real difference. The following morning, Jack stood at the threshold of his home one last time. His car was packed and his future awaited. But before he left, he noticed a small figure walking toward him. It was Megan. "Jack," she said, voice trembling, I just wanted to apologize for everything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know I'm so sorry. I'll never be able to make up for what I did." Jack stood there, looking at the woman who had once been everything to him. His heart broke for her, but there was a weight to his words that he couldn't escape. "Megan," he said softly, "I don't know what you want from me anymore. I've tried, but trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. I've moved on." Megan's face crumpled, and Jack could see the devastation in her eyes. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her footsteps heavy. Jack felt a strange sense of finality. He returned to his packing, the weight of the decision settling in. His marriage, his old life, was behind him. The future was unknown, but it was his to create. Later that day, Jack sat in his lawyer's office, signing the final divorce papers. Megan's consent had been quick, almost too quick. As he left the office, he felt a strange relief. It was over. That night, just before he was set to leave Millbrook, the doorbell rang. He opened the door to find Megan standing there, eyes red and tired. "I've gathered the last of my things," she said quietly. Jack nodded, stepping aside. The air between them was heavy with all the words that had been left unsaid. As Megan packed up the last of her belongings, she paused, looking at Jack. "I still love you, Jack," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't expect anything. I just want you to know—" Jack's heart clenched, and he stared at her. The woman he had once loved. The woman who had betrayed him. There was no way back for them. "I'm sorry," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I can't. I've moved on." Tears welled in Megan's eyes, but she nodded. "I understand." As she turned to leave, Jack handed her a letter, something he had written for closure. Megan looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow, taking the letter without a word. She left, and Jack stood in the silence of his empty house. The past was behind him now, but the pain lingered like a scar that never truly healed. But in that moment, he knew it was time to move forward. The next morning, as Jack drove away, he saw a crowd gathered outside his home. His students, parents, colleagues, people whose lives he had touched. They had come to say goodbye. Tears stung Jack's eyes as he waved to them, his heart full. He hadn't realized how much he had meant to them until now. As the crowd slowly dissipated, Jack glanced one last time at the town he was leaving behind. And in that moment he knew. He was walking away from one chapter, but a new one awaited. A fresh start, a chance to rebuild, to impact lives in ways he never imagined. And as he drove into the unknown, Jack allowed himself to feel hope for the first time in months. Meanwhile, Megan sat alone in her apartment, staring at the letter Jack had left behind. Tears streamed down her face as she read his words. Words that gave her the closure she had so desperately sought. But it wasn't enough to fix the damage she had done. Her life was in ruins, and she knew it. It would take time, maybe years, but she was determined to rebuild, to become a better person. She had lost everything, but somewhere deep inside, she knew that the road to redemption had to begin now. As she sat there in the silence, she made a promise to herself. She would change. She would find a way to make things right, even if it meant starting from the very bottom. Jack's letter was the first step, a letter that marked the end of one story and the beginning of another.